Maria, I just met a girl named Maria, and suddenly that name will never be the same to me.
So West Side Story danced its way into theaters of October of 1961, and it was based off the play by Leonard Bernstein and also Jeremy Robbins. So this year will mark the 60th anniversary for that movie, and this movie was nominated for 11 Oscars and won 10 of them, including Best Picture and Best Director. So this story takes place in the ghetto part of New York, and we follow a rival gang, one being the Sharks, which are a Puerto Rican gang, and the other one being the Jets, which are an American gang, and basically follow one member of each gang that basically falls in love at first sight, and we go along the journey as they are basically forbidden to be together, all of that leading up to a tragic ending. So if you're unaware, basically this story is a lot like Romeo and Juliet, but set in a different time period. I won't say more modern because this movie is 60 years old, but in a way more modern. And honestly, what can be said about this movie? It has inspired so many things over the time. It mainly inspired Michael Jackson's Bad video, and also it has inspired, most notably, Michael Bay and the way he shoots his movies. So what makes this such a classic? This movie is a classic movie. This movie, still, like I said, this movie came out 60 years ago and it still holds up today. And one of the main reasons why I think this movie still holds up today is mainly for the fact that it does everything right. The acting, the directing, the music, the cinematography, the editing, everything that this movie can offer is very it's perfect. Everything about this movie is essentially perfect. One thing that I love about this movie is how it takes from different time period. We have the Romeo and Juliet storyline, which has been around for hundreds of years. And also this movie does feel a lot or is heavily inspired by those like Gene Kelly type of film, those big musicals with lights and everything. And at the same time it took what was popular in the late 50s, which was juvenile delinquents, and it also is a musical. So it combines all of these together to create something different. One thing that I find interesting with the movie is the realism that it brings to itself. What I mean by that is that this movie takes place in the summertime, and so the characters in the movie are very sweaty. It's very hot. You can feel the heat from the sun in this movie, and also like it doesn't glamorize these people. Like they wear regular clothes of what some people would wear at those time period. Like they will wear clothes that are dirty. They like maybe they haven't cleaned them in a while. Because this movie does is about the low class people and how they live in these time period. And also this movie have like some of the locations they shot at aren't really beautiful looking. In fact, they remind me a lot of my where I used to grow up at. And this movie is 60 years old, older than I am. But like I said as well, this movie is inspired by those old classic musicals. And so this movie also have beautiful sets with great use of color. And so the amalgamation of those two really does make this movie feel like its own world. But one thing is that this movie does understand itself as a musical. And so everything in this movie is, through singing and through dancing. So it's meant to show somewhat of a, like it's not supposed to be too realistic into it. So like I said, that's very unique of this movie is where it takes people who, so this movie takes the idea of musicals and the fantasizing of musicals and how they are, but it brings some sort of realism into it. But this movie is not meant to, like, it doesn't treat itself as a movie about that's realistic. This movie, like some of the scenes or some of the fight scenes in this movie are choreographed. And that's interesting. I find that very fascinating that when these people are fighting, it's choreographed. This movie knows that it's a musical. It knows that it's a musical first. And so I have to give praise for the creator of the play, which is Leonard Bernstein and Jerome Robbins. And what they did is that they got this very competent director, which I think is a little bit underrated, Robert Wise, who has made some amazing movies in the past before he made this movie. So one thing that I do find this movie very fascinating is the way it brings a social commentary, where it talks about uh, social class, because the movie is about these Americans and these Puerto Ricans, and where the Jets are the Americans and the Sharks are the Puerto Ricans. And the plot of the movie is about these two rival gangs coming up one another. Like I said, it's a lot like Romeo and Juliet, but it involves somewhat of a social class. But it's not like it doesn't force or tells you like the message isn't important. What's important is the story itself. And so there are moments in where these people do take time to talk about the advantage of being an American and the disadvantages of not being American. But it's done in a musical way. And that's interesting. Like you sing along with it, but you at the same time you like you could understand like, oh, they are talking about social injustice. And there's that in this movie, but it's very subtle. It's not too on the nose. There's subtlety of this movie telling a very dark, not dark, but a more realistic take of social injustice that is going on at the time period and still going on to this day. And that's why I think this movie is such a classic, because that it's trying to tell a message, but that's not the moral of the story. The thing that the story trying to do is tell a good story. So it grabs from different time period, different so this graph from different time period brings them all together, and but it's a musical first, and then the social commentary that it tries to talk about social injustice here in America. That's like that's not first. What's first is the musical, is the dancing, is the singing, it's the location, uh, it's the sets, and then when you really focus, then if you really analyze this movie, then you'll see that this movie is saying a lot about social injustice. And that's why I think this movie is very good and still holds up to this day, because it knows what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a musical, but at the same time, it brings somewhat of realism into this musical, and bring it gives that unique feeling to it. It's trying to tell you a message about social injustice, but it's not the movie is like it's not hand-fisted. It's very subtle. And also it's in the plot as well. The plot is these two different cultures living together in the same spot, and so the rivalry that becomes of that. So this movie knows exactly what it wants to be, and this is why I think this movie is still very good to this day. But I can't deny, this movie is very classic. Those songs are still good to this very day. And by the end of the movie, I was emotionally attached to these characters, and I wanted them to, succeed. And this movie has a tragic ending because, like I said, it borrows from Romeo and Juliet, and so that got to me. Movies nowadays don't really get to me. And so that is my general review on West Side Story, and mainly as to why I think this movie still holds up to this day. So if you haven't had a chance to see this movie, do yourself a favor, watch this movie. It's a really good movie. It's pretty long, but it really will pass by very quick. You will not even notice how long the movie is. And also, Spielberg is going to be making the remake for this movie, so I really can't wait to see what he's got to do with that one. So that's going to be all for now. Hope you folks enjoyed this review. Please comment down below. Let me know what you think about this movie. Do you think what I what is your aspect of the movie? What did you like about the movie? What stuff warrant you to what you didn't enjoy of the movie? And also, let me know if you guys think this movie still holds up to this very day. Would you agree with me or would you disagree with me? I'm very curious to know. And so stay tuned for more video that's going to be coming pretty shortly as well. So with that being said, we're out of here.